healthcare, education and Act 46, the budget deficit, economic decline, wind energy, and opiate addiction are all major issues that are having an effect in the lives of all Vermonters. That is why the race in 2016 for governor is extremely important. And for that reason, Fact TV, in partnership with The Commons, The Eagle Times, The Shopper, The Brattleboro Reformer, BC TV, and Wool Radio, is presenting to you Fact TV's Gubernatorial Highlight, where we interview all the candidates who are running for governor so that you can see where they stand on the issues that affect your life and the future of Vermont. In this episode, we'll be interviewing Phil Scott, who's running for the Republican nomination for governor of Vermont. Get to know him and where he stands on the issues.
Good morning. We're continuing with our series of gubernatorial highlights, and today we're here with Lieutenant Governor Phil Scott. He's a Republican candidate running this year. He's agreed to come over and talk with us about his interests, why he wants to be elected, and what qualifies him to be governor of Vermont. Thank you so much for coming over this morning.
Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Yeah, this is great. I know that you've been really busy. You've come here from several, you had a forum last night, you had a forum this morning, so.
We had one on PBS last night in Burlington. We had one in Brattleboro this morning for the chamber. So it's been that way for quite a number of weeks, but it's been good.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's sort of interesting. This year seems to be the forum year. Like everybody's wants to get you guys out talking and really get
because of the presidential primary. There was such interest in that. And certainly from the Republican side, there was 15, 16 candidates to start with.
Right,
Seeing those narrow down, and a lot of interest, of course, with Bernie and Hillary on the other side, that they've been a lot of interest there as well. So there's a lot of unrest throughout the country.
Yeah.
I think there's some frustration here in the state as well. So I think people are interested, as they should be, and
right.
need to get involved.
And this is like a precedent-setting election too, in that there's so many leadership positions that are changing all at once. It's almost like the whole government could change.
That's right, and it's not just. Of course, we're going to have a new president, regardless of what the existing president wants. I mean, you have a new president. It's the same here in the state. We have a
new governor,
new lieutenant governor, new speaker, new president pro tem.
Yeah.
Leadership amongst the House and the Senate. I mean, and then you think about with all that change and then change in administrations. You're going to have new secretaries and commissioners as well.
Oh, I would imagine.
So it's like a wholesale change, and that's why I think we have to look at it as an opportunity to move forward in a new direction and look at things with our eyes wide open.
Great. I actually choose to look at it that way too, because we don't want to look at it as like it's going to be chaotic. But there should be some confusion, I imagine. But I do think it's an amazing opportunity for people to just everything's going to be unfrozen, and we can move ahead and we can build new ways of doing things, and that's a great.
And I've used this as a stepping stone to some of my ideas. One of them seems fairly simple, but I called for this a few weeks ago. A 90-day legislative session. And some people would say, well, what's that got to do with anything?
Right.
Right now, it's open-ended. Right now, the legislature goes until the budget finally passes.
Right.
And I was in the Senate for 10 years before becoming lieutenant governor. So during that time, I remember being there until June 6th or 8th. And that's just way too long.
Right.
And I think that if we want to preserve the citizens' legislature, which I believe we should, I think it works because you have people from all walks of life that are able to have their voices heard. And I think we need a little bit more balance in that regard. And I think the 90-day session would provide for that. I think that there are many people in the state that think maybe I should run for the legislature. Maybe I'd like to get involved.
But then the commitment is you have to have a job and be able to
think about it.
Support yourself.
If you have to go to your employer, let's say, and tell them, I'd like to run for the legislature. Their first question might be, well, that's great, Mike. How long are you going to be gone?
Yeah.
And your answer would be, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's until maybe May, June. I just don't know. And I don't think that's fair.
I agree.
think if we had a 90-day session that ended April 1, I think that we can get all our work done. I've been there long enough to understand that. A lot of it gets done towards the end of the session anyhow.
Right.
And I think prioritization, I think it would be more efficient. I think that we pay attention to the details and get our work done.
That's a great idea, because being a procrastinator myself, I know that if you can push it out, you're going to push it out. And if there's a deadline, then you don't.
We definitely, the legislature does procrastinate in a number of different ways, and we're all, it's.
I mean, it's human nature, yeah. It's part of
yeah.
being who we are. And, but I know that.
Deadline, emergency, or whatever, then we seem to be able to get things done.
Exactly. Everything gets done in the last 10 minutes of a meeting.
That's right.
Because.
Well, it's just, if you had open-ended meetings, when there was no end time, I would say that it would go on for quite a while.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the principle's valid.
But I think when you have a structured meeting, you get your stuff, you get everything done.
So what would have to happen? Would that have to be a legislative?
It would just be by resolution. Some people had come to me after I made that statement and said, "Well, you're going to have to change the Constitution." And I said, "Well, not really. The Constitution provides for every other year session, actually. We don't have to meet every year.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's the legislature that decides with a continuing resolution to meet, just to break and meet the following year. It's just an ongoing one session, ongoing.
Right.
So it's the legislature that does that.
And that would actually open some things up, and because the budget being delayed, just personally, some of the stuff we experience is then if the budget is delayed, then the grants that go out to different agencies are delayed, and then pretty soon, like we're working on a summer youth program, employment, and they can't do the summer youth employment program because the budget wasn't passed, and now that it's passed, they can submit the grants, and everything slides back, so it looks like summer youth is going to start in August.
In fall.
Yeah.
But that's part of, again, the second part of that was a 90-day session as well as a 2-year budgeting cycle. I think that that can work. We have a 2-year session, so why not just build a budget for that 2 years?
Yeah.
And then if there's a budget adjustment that's necessary, just do it in that second year. Because that's what happens now, actually. We have, you come up with a budget, and then you have budget adjustment that starts just as soon as you get back, and then you're building the new budget while you're doing budget adjustments.
Yeah,
it seems like a step that makes it a little too complicated, and if we did a 2-year cycle, just did budget adjustment in January of the following year, then problem solved.
Sounds good. So what else do you want to do?
Really focus on the economy.
Right.
It's something that I think that we have some huge challenges ahead. Nothing that can't be solved because literally we're too small a state not to be able to be nimble enough to make some changes to really focus on that.
Because I think and I think the economy, a lot of the other problems that we're seeing are rooted in our economy because our economy is not performing really well. So then we see people not having jobs, and then all of those social ills that we are really feeling now.
You think about what the real problem is here. We have a population of 620,000 people. It's been fairly stagnant over the last couple of decades, so it isn't growing. But what is growing, or what's happening, is we're aging.
Right.
And we're losing this category from 25 to 45. We've lost 30,000 people out of that category, the age group 25 to 45, in the last since the last census. So when you think about who that represents, that's our workforce.
Right. Those are the people that are innovating and paying taxes and working.
They're buying homes, they're having families, they're utilizing services, they're buying products, and then they pay taxes.
Right.
So if we have less of them participating in the system, so to speak, paying in revenue, it puts the burden on the rest of us who are still standing. And they're also not having kids. We're not having as many people here. Our workforce has actually shrunk in the last 7 years. We have less people working today than we did 7 years ago. Even though our unemployment rate's low, that doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
Because what we really want to know is what the net is, how many people are working. That's really important. So again, that age group, 25 to 45, that's 5% of our population right there.
Right.
So I think we need to build our population, actually. I think we need to set a goal. Let's just say, we're going to get to 700,000 in 15 years. Let's have that goal in mind, and then figure out how we get there by rebuilding, the people that we want are really in that 25 to 45 age
Right.
group, so that they can be part of society and start driving that economic engine that I think is not running on all 8 cylinders at this
No,
point.
and it's hard to figure out which is the chicken and which is the egg. Are the people leaving and then that's creating the depression, or is it not depression? You know what I mean?
I
But
do- I
the
do
reduction in growth or vibrancy in the economy.
And that's, I'd rather not focus on the chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
Rather, let's just dig in.
Yeah.
We know what we need to do. We need to revitalize the economy. We need to have more prosperity in Vermont. And I think that's, I started this after becoming lieutenant governor. I'm a hands-on learner, always have been. Like to fix things, do things, build things. That's just part of how my brain works and how I like that, the instant gratification of seeing something accomplished in that way. So after becoming lieutenant governor, I thought, how do I keep in touch with Vermonters? How do I, rather than just read reports or read this study and take a phone call, I'd rather get out in the trenches.
Right.
So I've done this Vermont Everyday Jobs Tour, where I've gone to work in the shoes of someone else in about 35 jobs throughout Vermont.
Oh, good for you. Yeah.
Everything from beekeeping to making violins to teaching second grade to working for Green Mountain Power, working on the ski slopes, bakeries, distilleries, you name
Right.
it, I probably have done it. But what I've come back with, there's a common theme. And the common theme has been that folks are struggling.
Yeah,
The
that's
employees
definitely
are
true.
working 2 and 3 jobs just trying to make ends meet. And they're not doing it. They're trying to pay their property taxes, they're trying to pay their mortgage or their rent or car payments and so forth. And they're just not making it. And so you got to look back again at why is there this mass problem? And again, I think that it's about economic vitality.
Right.
And again, we haven't paid enough attention. I think there's a bit of arrogance, maybe, in terms of the quality of life in Vermont, which is great. I grew up here. I don't ever intend to leave here. I want this to be better for all of us, my kids included. But we have to accept and acknowledge that we have a problem first before we can solve it.
That's true.
That's the first thing. And then if we can do that, we can all get on the same page and have the same goals. And we may have different ways of getting there, but if we can all pull in the same direction, I think we'd be better off. If you look back at 2 years ago, in that biennium, of the legislative biennium, there was like 1,200 plus bills that were introduced in the legislature. And we took a look at every single one that came through, and there was probably 30 that would have had a positive effect on the economy out of the 1,200 plus bills. And out of that, when all was said and done, there was only 3 that passed. So that
Really?
doesn't tell me that we're doing enough to pay attention. This last session that just barely ended last month, I can't pinpoint, I can't point to one single bill that will have any meat to it, any jobs attached to it, anything to do to helping ourselves out of this economic
Right.
problem we're in. And so I think it takes leadership to do that.
I agree, and I totally agree about what happened in the last legislature. It seemed, and I don't know, but it seemed like people were sort of waiting. It was like, well, we're going to put this off and see what happens next time.
Right.
And that's not a good way to, especially now.
The legislature, and I was part of it for 10 years, but the legislature is good at putting things off.
Yeah.
Kicking the can.
So what would you classify as a job, as a bill, like you had 1,200 bills, and 30 were positive to the economy. What characteristics did those bills have?
Anything that would have had jobs attached to it, anything that would have helped in different ways, businesses and so forth, and to create jobs and again, to create opportunity for Vermont. And that's how we classified it.
Okay. And could you give me an example of one that would like be your favorite, or?
No, I mean, I can't give you one specific
Or, you know,
one as
a
favorite,
group, but-
let me, I'll go through a few things that they're fairly simple in some respects. I don't think it's going to take a lot. I think a lot of it's about confidence as well. I've been a small business owner my entire life. 20 years ago, I didn't have a political bone in my body. I had no interest in
Yeah.
politics whatsoever. But I started complaining about what them were doing to me in Montpelier. And literally, they were 2 miles down the road.
Okay,
The
yeah.
house is from my business. So I started complaining more and more about what them were doing, and until finally I looked myself in the mirror and thought, maybe I should be part of the solution. Maybe I should offer my expertise, because I don't think they quite get it. So that's when I ran for the Senate, again, very naively ran for the Senate, and but I was elected. Some of it because of my, I think, notoriety as a race car driver. I've been racing in Vermont in the Northeast for 25 years. And so I think that was helpful in getting elected in my region, and grew up there as well. But it doesn't keep you there.
Right.
And it's something that you have to work at. You have to build faith and trust. And I was, and I know I'm digressing here, but
That's all right. I like the background.
but I was, again, in the Senate, learning the ropes, so to speak. And about partway through my 10 years, I was offered a position of leadership. I was offered a chair of a committee by Peter Welch, Dick Mazza. They were, and there was three people that actually choose who's going to be committee chairs. I was one of only 2 Republicans in the entire legislature that had a chair. And it wasn't because they necessarily agreed with me politically, philosophically, but they trusted me because I could play the political games. And I can. I mean, push comes to shove, I could, but I don't like to, because I think we have this lack of faith and trust in government throughout the nation.
That's true.
And as well, some here in Vermont. And we may not be able to do anything about the national crisis, faith and trust crisis we face, but we can act appropriately in our own backyard. And that's something that I always want to be able to look myself in the mirror the next day, regardless of what happens, and know that I'm doing things for the right reason. And I think legislators, we're all politicians during campaign time, but after you're elected, I believe that you need to transition to becoming a public servant.
Right.
That's what you should be doing. Forget about the power, forget about the ego, just do the right things for the right reasons and do them to represent your constituency. I think it's pretty simple. So
what would you see as a way of stimulating small-scale economies in Vermont? Because I understand that you could bring in like a General Electric or someone like that, but that's not going to, wherever that goes, that's going to really stimulate that part. But it's not, I think part of the thing I like about Vermont, and the thing that's also a weakness about Vermont, is it's all small scale.
I think you have to have a combination, to be honest with you. It's probably not a popular viewpoint, but I look at it like a mall. I mean, you need your anchor stores.
Right, exactly.
You need the ripple effect from your anchor stores to support the other stores. You need the traffic, and that's what we need. We need a few anchors. We've got some good ones, I think, in the state, but we need to make sure we're paying attention to them too, because a lot of times we don't pay attention, and we don't listen to them, and then all of a sudden they slowly leave the state. So I think that staying in touch with the businesses that we have. Trying to encourage the businesses that we have, small and large, to grow and to be a better partner, to be honest with you. I think it's going to take a bit of a culture change in order to do that. I think back to a lot of the way businesses are sometimes treated. I have a friend that is in the grain store, hardware store business. And he called me up, and he was very frustrated because he'd just been through an audit, and sales tax audit, and he said they got him for $17,000. Don't hold me to the number, but around $17,000. And he said it was frustrating to him because there was a number of points that they made, and he just felt like they spent 240 hours there auditing his books.
They spent more time than they were making.
So he said, and one of the areas that they cited him for was that he wasn't charging tax on gloves. And he said, well, it's a clothing.
Yeah, and I would have thought the same thing.
We don't charge tax on gloves, it's clothing. And they said, well, actually, we interpret that as anything work-related. Is actually taxable. And so he didn't know that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known that either.
In Vermont do. And so, but his point was, his main point was, instead of spending 240 hours a year trying to play the I gotcha type route,
Oh, yeah.
where you tell me all the things I did wrong, why don't you spend about 40 hours here telling me what I need to tax?
Yeah.
Why don't you be proactive?
Or even put that up on, have a workshop or something like that, yeah.
In some respects, I just think that that's the culture change I think we need, because what happened to him was it just left a bad taste in his mouth.
Yeah.
And so what does that do to a business owner? It reduces that confidence you have in your government.
Well, it takes you off,
Yeah.
because I've had this similar run-ins with the tax department,
he
and it's
said,
like,
well,
well,
geez, maybe I don't want to expand. Maybe I don't want to grow. This isn't worth it.
Yeah.
I'm tired. It's hard enough being in business sometimes without fighting somebody
man,
that should be. They're our agents. Our businesses, they collect revenue for us. We should be encouraging them. We should be helping them so that they could, if they knew what they're supposed to tax, for instance, they'd be collecting it.
right.
And then we'd get the revenue. So I think, again, culture change, simplification, not so much subjectivity.
Okay.
I think that's important.
So, and all this coming back to stimulating the economy or revitalizing the economy.
So I was, last year, I recognized this after my first couple of years as lieutenant governor, that folks are struggling. I call it the crisis of affordability here in Vermont.
Yeah,
And
that's a good
that's
word.
when I started digging into it a little bit more. And then that's when I came up with the idea, we need to focus on this. And I brought it to leadership, the governor and leadership, and asked them to take a look at this over the next couple of years, dedicate a legislative session over the next 2 years, 4 years, to just dedicate it to the economy. Every bill that comes through, take a look at it through the lens of, does this help or hurt the economy?
Right.
If it helps, let's put it on the front burner. If it doesn't, let's put it off for now. Let's deal with this. And it was, I thought I had some momentum at that point, but it never came to be. The governor had some other initiatives that he took up that were important to him. But I think that, it hurt us in the long run, because we're seeing the effects of that as we speak.
Well, and I guess one of the things we want to talk a little bit about, and I don't know whether, because as you bring up the current governor, one of his things was healthcare. And healthcare directly affects the economy through however you want to look at it. It's whether you want to see it as a tax on the employer, or it encourages or discourages people to come to Vermont based on what they have to do with as far as healthcare. And it also is probably one of the biggest industries in Vermont, in that we don't have a lot of other big industries, but hospitals and healthcare are a big. Yeah.
And we have some, employment challenges there as well.
Oh, yeah,
having qualified help
Right.
in different areas. I mean, that's the one thriving area that we have. The older we get, the more usage there is.
Yes, that's true.
It's just natural.
So,
So healthcare.
yeah, so we're in a spot right now. We have we have a system where we started down a road, and it sounds, at least I'm not, because I'm not an expert at this, but it feels like we're sort of stalled, and then now we're looking at some different things, and it's not.
I mean, a lot of people, when they hear about our healthcare problems, they put it all into one basket.
Yeah.
It's all a problem, and I would tend to agree. But there was a lot of things, different dynamics going on at the same time. If you look back about 6 years ago, the governor ran his first race on the promise of bringing single payer.
Yeah, single payer healthcare.
And I think that there were a number of people that thought that was the answer. I was one who said, I will be objective. You prove it to me. Show me if this is the best thing since sliced bread. Show me how we're going to do it, how it's going to be implemented, how we're going to pay for it, and who's going to pay for it, and how much. Just a few basic questions. And I remember him saying a few times, "We'll prove it to you. We'll prove it to you." And I said, "Well, if you can prove it to me, then you have a chance of proving it to
everybody
in the industry, because I'm a bit of a litmus test, I think, in that regard." So it never
Yeah.
it never came to be. It never followed through. I think, again, for political purposes, I think it was extended over 5 or 6 year period before finally coming to the conclusion that many of us came to years before, that it wasn't for Vermont. We couldn't afford it. And I think it was detrimental to the economy as well. When I say that, I think it was just the inconsistency, the uneasiness that it brought with it, that people didn't know what it was going to mean to their businesses. They
Right.
didn't know whether you're going to be, we heard all the rumors, it's going to be a 15, 16, 17, 18% payroll tax. What does that mean for me and my business? I don't know.
Yeah. Because you don't know what it is.
Can I be competitive with other states? Can I be competitive in the worldwide market? Is this, show me? And it would never, nobody ever put it on paper, how it was going to be paid for, who was going to do it. It was just a lot of money, or it seemed like it. So we were in this state of flux for 5 or 6 years. Businesses who I spoke to about coming to Vermont, luring into Vermont, would always, they'd ask the standard questions about, how's your utility rates? Well, they're fairly high. Do you have a corporate tax? Yeah, we do. How's your property taxes?
Yeah, pretty high.
But you get all through that, and I keep ending with, we have a great quality of life here. But that only goes so far.
Right.
And then some of the ending questions would be, and what are you doing with your healthcare system?
Yeah, because that's going to be...
So we had single payer going on,
Right.
right? At the very same time,
That the national is moving
The
to...
Affordable Care Act.
The Affordable Care Act.
So that was coming. That was a national effort. So we had to implement that too. So they were converging at the same time. I believe, and I should let the governor speak for himself, but I believe he thought that the two would merge. And so
Yeah, that was what everything was led to
Affordable
believe.
Care
Yeah.
Act, build this website.
And then everyone else would replicate us, and we would be great.
We'd be leading the nation in this
Yeah.
regard. Well, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Again, single payer was too expensive. Couldn't support it with our small economy. Too small, just wouldn't work for just that. We're not on an island.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, building this website, this one-of-a-kind, custom-made IT structure that failed from the get-go, and never did become fully functional. So they've got this one-of-a-kind custom setup, this foundation that isn't working.
It's
unstable
Yeah.
at this point. It's got fractures in it, and many of us have been trying to encourage the governor to go in a new direction.
And what would that direction be, though? I guess we're in a position right now where no one quite knows what's going on. At least I don't.
There's a couple of things you could do. We spent over $200 million on this IT structure. And that's just the part of the problem. As I see it, it's not just the getting the website working, but then if you have a one-of-a-kind of anything, you have somebody that built it for you, then you're going to
dependent
be
on that person.
to that person.
Exactly.
And so when that happens, all these IT structures, anything needs maintenance, right? Every single year needs maintenance. So if that means an elevated cost, an operating cost, that's a concern to me. So we're not able to call anybody else up because they don't have anything like it. So we're going to just be calling up whoever
built it. Yeah.
And so the maybe $50-60 million a year to maintain it.
Yeah. So where do we go, though?
So I've two directions. One, we could go to the federal exchange. New Hampshire did it originally. They spent about $8 million. It was fully functional. It works. That's one way of doing it. I know initially when we called for that, the governor had said, well, there's a Supreme Court case, you might lose your subsidies, you're not going to be able to do this, and so forth and so on. Well, eventually, after a couple of years, the Supreme Court ruled on that and said, it's fine, you can keep the subsidies, that's not a problem. Well then, at that point, the governor had said, well, we're making some ground up here, we're going to be able to get this fully, we'll make it by this date. Well,
It hasn't, yeah.
But I was at a lieutenant governor's conference, and we have these national conferences of both parties get involved in this. And I was having a conversation with the lieutenant governor of Connecticut, Democrat, and we were talking, and also the lieutenant governor of Rhode Island. Rhode Island was saying similar stories that we had. They were struggling with their system. Connecticut said ours is fully functional. We have a great system. In fact, we've helped Maryland with theirs. We helped them build theirs. It's just like ours. And I said, well, that's great. Is there anything you can do for us? And they said, certainly. We would be happy to help in some way. So we set up a meeting down in their state. So I drive my pickup. So I grabbed the senator from Chittenden, Senator Ash, who chairs the Finance Committee, a Democrat, and Senator Kitchell, who from Caledonia County, who chairs the Appropriations Committee. And we jumped in the pickup and we headed down and we had a conversation with them. And it looked very promising. In fact, the lieutenant governor's in charge of the exchange in Connecticut. But the real brains behind the operation is a guy named Jim Wadley, who grew up in Essex Junction, Vermont, went to UVM,
Ironic, huh?
and moved to Connecticut. His parents still live here, so he has a vested interest in Vermont. So we developed a relationship, and he said, we can do this. So they said, let us build a model, and we'll come up and we'll present it. We'll show you what we can do. And I've always thought about these Northeast coalitions, that we should be working together. We're too small a state to do everything on our own. So this looked like an opportunity. So they came up, invited the administration, legislative leaders, joint fiscal office, everyone into my office, and they showed us the model. And they brought all their team up, and they showed us it looked autonomous. We were just using, it's a cloud-based structure, so we just grabbed what we needed, and they showed us exactly the model that would work. And they said we could transition to this within 6 months. This was a little over a year ago. And we could do this by your sign-up date, no problem at all. And we could share in the maintenance costs. There's all kinds of things, opportunities for the future if we do this. And it fell on deaf ears with the...
Because they were already running, going down their road,
You know, I think about it like you have a vehicle that, maybe an older vehicle, and you end up putting a new transmission in it, and then you think, oh, I got to keep going, and you put a new rear end in it, and you got to keep going, and then you have an engine go, and pretty soon you should have bought a new car.
Exactly. Well, they always say don't look at sunken costs because they're gone. You got to look at what the future costs are going to be.
And that's it's the same thing with this healthcare system. So we're in the position we're in right now. I still think there's opportunities to work with another.
Okay, so if you were elected governor, you'd be looking?
I would be absolutely looking to either go to the federal exchange or to work with another state. And Hawaii's got one. They were in a similar boat that we were. And they were able to keep a portion of theirs for Medicaid, but they adopted the federal exchange instead and used that. And somehow they've got the two linked. So again, there's another state we could,
you could partner with,
call to and say, we're trying to work this out. Can you help us? And I think that most states would. And I think again, we might be able to utilize this model for other things, like there's a Medicaid income, there's an eligibility program that the governor was trying to forward to the tune of $100 million until the legislature said,
we can't.
Let's wait for a minute because we haven't got this thing. Let's not commit another $100 million to anything.
And to be honest, the whole website thing did create a crisis of trust with and then whatever your political standing, it doesn't matter. It's across the board. Everybody's like, well, can these guys really do this?
That's the problem. There's no faith and trust, and rightfully so. So we need to make sure that we put something forward that people can trust.
That they can see and that it works. I agree.
I think that's so important to restore that.
Good. And I guess that comes down to, because one of the other things I've heard about state IT systems is that they're they're not dissimilar, but they're not all connected, and it's sometimes difficult to get good reports because it's like this report, there's this group doing this data, and this group doing this data, and there isn't sort of a unified data language or structure that works for everyone.
Yeah,
and
it certainly is important, especially when you think about human services. For instance, that's half our budget.
Yeah.
You know, Medicaid is 1/3 of our budget. So you got to get it right, and you got to have something that an IT system that works so that you can make sure that everybody is qualified and working in the same. We're all working off the same page.
Right.
And that's, we need to update our IT structure. But again, we have to prove ourselves.
Yeah.
In fact, Jim Wadley from Connecticut had called, and when the news broke about this $100 million system and so forth that the governor was trying to move forward on, he said, well, remember, we had a little conversation about this. If we could do attach hours, we could do it for about $10 million.
yeah. So there you have it.
Things are changing in this world. IT is always changing.
It is. The idea of being cloud-based is a really good idea, too, because it's not, if you're building your own server farms or whatever, that's sort of not where it is right now.
And being able to share, I think about a lot in terms of, I try and simplify in my own mind, but it was a number of years ago. Like I said, I've been in business for probably 30, 35 years. It was probably, I'd say about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, we had our bookkeeping system crashed. We had a custom-made bookkeeping system. And they told us that it was going to cost $8,000 to $10,000 to replace it. And I remember at the time thinking, that's way too much money. We don't have that much money, first of all. And it just seems like too much money to spend on some IT structure like that. So I talked to some others in business, and not the same construction type business, but they said, you ought to take a look at this QuickBooks thing. And I said, well, I've never heard of that. And he said, well, it's fairly inexpensive. I'm not sure if it worked for your business or not, but you ought to take a look at it. And the price tag was about $200, I remember. And I thought, it's worth a try.
Yeah, for $200 it's worth a try.
We never looked back.
Yeah, and I mean it's
and like, now it's grown. A lot of
everyone
people have
uses it.
QuickBooks, and with the beauty is that because everyone has it, it's common. So if I am doing my payroll, if our office manager is out and I'm doing payroll, which I have to do every once in a while, and I have a problem, I can call somebody else up that has the system. It's not
exactly, that's sort of beauty. Yeah.
And every year there's an update, an upgrade, and maintenance and so forth that's being done with a click of the button. So I think that's the way I look at how we should be.
How we should be as a state, too.
We can't do everything alone, and we can't be the first in everything. We don't need to be. We need to live within our means. We need to work with other states and make sure that we're working as efficiently as possible.
Good. How about education? If we were to switch gears a little bit and talk about education, how would you evaluate? How would you rate our education system as it is right now, and then how would you change it?
Yeah, I think again, when you look back about what the problem is, and it's like the chicken or egg issue, but we're educating 20,000 less kids than we were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a significant drop, but we haven't right-sized the infrastructure, and that's part of our problem. We're spending about $1.6 billion to educate those 86,000 kids, and I think that which is about 1/3 of our budget, overall budget. So when you think about that, and I talk about this a lot, that if you went to a group of people maybe a group of business owners or big thinkers, and you told them, I have $1.6 billion, I have 86,000 kids that I want to educate, I dare say we wouldn't be doing it the same way we're doing it today. I dare say that we would be doing it a much more 21st century way. And I think that we have to have, I think the faith and trust and the courage to do things differently, because we can't afford what we have. It drives the property tax discussion. So when we've heard over the last decade, people want property tax relief. This crisis of affordability is real. they need property tax relief. And the answer has always been, we get it after every election, we get it, we're going to do something about it,
But then
and nothing ever
yeah,
gets done.
because it's driven by the education. And so how do we change that?
So, again, Act 46 came along. It wasn't a bill that I would have crafted. It's got some problems associated with it. I think school choice is something that needs to be clarified in there. I think that competition is good. But I also think that people were expecting some reductions in the cost of education,
Right.
which I'm not sure that it's going to be able to deliver. But I think there should be, without it, we would not be having any conversation at this point. And these have been tough.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Conversations on the local level that have been happening as a result of Act 46. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having them. And I think that it does come down to
So
spending.
it's yeah.
So we have to. A lot of people have said, well, and I've heard other candidates talk about, well, we need a new formula. We need to. This has to be tailored in a different way. It has to be based on income and so forth and so on. From my perspective, I would rather have the conversation about spending first, because if you come up with another funding formula, you're just rearranging the deck chairs.
Right.
It's going to come out of another pocket.
Yeah, it's still the same money, yeah.
It's still the crisis of affordability. It's just coming out, and people are confused, and pretty soon you're not getting any better results. So we need to.
So how could we reduce spending? Because the other thing is, we are spending a lot of money, but the product we're getting is not, I would say, the best either. Because we have a lot of people that aren't going to, we're doing good at high school education, but we're not doing good at post-high school, which is really important right now.
Well, and it's all important.
Yeah.
We're not number one in the nation.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's the problem. And I think that if we're
And not that we need to be number one in the nation, but we need to be really.
But if we were.
It's sort of like what we were saying before. We need to be there.
Right. But if we were, I think that we could justify the spending.
Yeah, okay.
You know, if they're number one, you say, well, at least we're getting.
Yeah, we're number one. Yeah.
I think that's what Vermonters want. They're frugal enough to don't mind spending the money, but let's get something as a result of the spending. So we have to, again, have the courage to think in a 21st century way. There is going to be some consolidation. We do need to get rid of some supervisory districts. We need to have more interactive learning. We need to utilize shared resources. We can't all have our own little silos. We're going to have to work together to make this work. And it doesn't mean that a small school isn't living within its means. And it doesn't mean that every school should be painted with a broad brush. But I think that individually you have to look at that. I was at Linden Institute up in Lindenville, Vermont, and they have a great school system, private academy. And they, if you want an example of a school system living within its means with a great output, that is one.
Really? Okay.
They're fairly frugal, but at the same time, they understand it's about the interaction with kids. It's about the kids, putting them first. And I think that they're an example of the way we could do business, again, through competition. They attract students from as far away as Grand Isle. They even board students there. So there's a mix that does work. They compete with another independent school, St. Johnsbury Academy. Well, Burton is another example.
The Vermont Academy right here in Saxon's River.
Yeah, absolutely. Campus School. I mean, there's all kinds of different variations of delivering an education, a quality education in a different way. Everyone learns differently, and I was one of them. So I'm really sensitive to that. I think we should be, as well, I think we should be emphasizing more technical school, more vocational. I think we're going to have a lack of service related employees in the future.
Because electricians and plumbers are already hard to find.
Yeah, the average age of a construction employee worker at this point is about 53 in this state. That's not a good.
That's not a good number.
So there's going to be opportunities in the future. So
definitely.
I look forward to that. But we need to again continue with these tough conversations about how do we reduce the costs.
And I guess
high quality education. And again, I think we have some of the answers. But there's a lot of turf battles that go on. Everybody wants to maintain their school.
Yeah, everybody wants to change. Everybody wants change, but they don't want to change. Yeah,
I think the poster child of how the problem is right in Montpelier. Montpelier High School has had a declining population over the last 10 to 20 years. I grew up in Barrie, Spalding High School. We were always competitive with them. I think we were a D1 school. Montpelier was a D1 school, and we were competing. Well, they're barely a D3 at this point.
Really? Yeah.
In fact, they've had some of they've discontinued, I think, football and hockey, because of lack of money.
Because of lack
They don't have
of
enough
people. Yeah. Wow.
So their declining population has been a problem. 6 miles up the road is Union 32. There's a way that they could work together in some way if they thought outside the box. Maybe it's a couple of grades, maybe it's some interaction in some way. But there's always been a resistance to combining that in any way. Because
that, yeah, it was turf. It was like everybody, exactly.
Be realistic.
Yeah.
And again, these discussions aren't easy to have.
So, and in a way, you're saying Act 46 is good because it creates those discussions.
Yeah,
it's forcing people into saying, what are you going to do?
Again, I think there needs to be clarifications to Act 46.
Yeah.
I think that school choice is big. I think there's ways of accomplishing different goals as well. But I do think it spurred the conversation.
Yeah.
Again,
Which wouldn't have happened.
We wouldn't be having it
that's
right
a good
now.
point.
We'd be just complaining about our high property taxes.
Right. Speaking, well, let's talk a little bit about taxes. Where do you see taxes going? And I bring this up just out of my own personal. I was talking with a guy the other day, and he's from Massachusetts, and he's retiring. And he's chosen to retire in New Hampshire as opposed to Vermont because he says, well, you guys, you're going to tax my Social Security.
Yeah. Pretty sad when you think about it.
Yeah, it's like, well, this guy, he's had a job. He's sort of one of those guys we'd like to have here. And it's sort of, I had never thought about that. But he said, yeah, you guys, you tax Social Security. I'm going to live across the river.
Well, it's the same way up in the Chittenden County area. I've spoken to a number of employees at different tech businesses that live in New York, and they commute.
Yeah.
Go across the lake. Why is that? Costs less over in New York.
Yeah.
Who would have ever thought that?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I always thought that New York was expensive, Massachusetts was expensive.
Yeah.
New Hampshire's never been expensive in some respect.
But yeah.
So that's a problem. And again, the chicken or the egg, but at the same time, we as a state government have to live within our means.
Right.
We aren't doing that. The taxes and fees have been growing at a rate of about 5% every year for the last 6 or 7 years. When the revenue, the economy has only been growing at about 2%.
Right.
And that's a recipe for disaster. And that's why there's always a budget.
Well, that's what we're always looking at, trying to, where are you going to get this last bit of money?
Some people, the mentality is just raise tax and fees in order to pay for it. We have to do that. We have to provide the services. And I'm saying it's a day of reckoning, and I think it's now. And I think that we have to tighten our belts. I think we should be presenting as governor. I would take a look at what the wages and the economy grew from the previous year. Let's not guess at this. We don't have to say
data.
5%. We have the data.
Yeah.
Let's just go back and take a look at what happened then, because that's a pretty good indicator of what's going to happen this year. So let's use that. And if the economy grew at and wages grew at 1.5%, that's what we limit the growth of the budget. And that's a line in the sand. But you develop that early, and you give them that parameter. You bring in the legislative leaders and say, this is what we can agree to here. We're not going over this line right now. How we get there and what you do within your budgets and what you do,
that's up to you.
Fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. We can have those discussions, but we're not going over this line.
Yeah.
And then you have to follow through.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be easy. I don't discount the fact that it's
well, it is tough. Everybody wants,
we have to do it in our own lives,
That's true.
We all have to do it in our own lives. We all have to do it in our own businesses as well. We have to have these tough discussions, and they're healthy, by the way. In the long run, we may not like it at the time, but it's healthy. Learning how to do things differently, really trying to be creative about certain situations is good. And I think it also goes down to couple of questions. When I have to make a purchase, again, in my own life or in my business, I just ask myself two questions. One is, do I want it or do I need it? And it sounds really
that's
simple.
true. That's true.
It's basic, but it's so true. And I think we need to do that throughout government as well. Because sometimes I don't like the answer that I get when I ask myself
I really want that, but
I don't really want that motorcycle, but I don't really need it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, it's something of that nature. I think we have to make sure that we work together with state employees as well. I think they're a tremendous resource, by the way, that we don't take advantage of enough. That when a state employee retires, I think there should be an exit interview. And, and just ask them, what can we do better? You've been in this for 30 years. What do you see in your department? I think they talk then about what it is they see that we could do better. You can't implement all of it, but
there should be efficiencies that you can find.
Bring something back, I think. And I think as well, when you're building your administration, I think it's really important to rather than have political appointments that are, you owe some favor to or whatever, that you take a look at that they have expertise in that area as well as management experience. They know how to interact with people. They also know how to adhere to a budget, build a budget, and then follow through. And I think that those are things, and take care of the customer, which is our constituents and our businesses and so forth. We're all customers.
Right.
Treat them like that, and give them an opportunity to react appropriately as well. I've always tried to, in my political racing business life, I treat others the way I want to be treated. The golden rule is pretty simple. Again, it's basic, but it works, and I think that it has benefits, long-range benefits, and again, I think that it builds that faith and trust in government again. When they know you're listening, and you're trying to do what you can to help, and you're running, and you're being a public servant rather than trying to satisfy your ego or trying to satisfy that urge for power.
Right.
It's more about trying to do good.
Yeah, and I would say that you're the fifth person I've interviewed as governor for this position, and the thing that's been refreshing to me is I don't see that in any of the candidates. I really believe that everyone's pretty down to earth, and that's what I like about. And it's not a big corporate political party line. It's all about the Vermonters, and I do appreciate that in all you guys. I really thank you for that.
You have to build consensus. You're going to have to work together.
Yeah.
If someone thinks they're going to become governor and just wave their magic wand and make things so, they haven't been involved in the process because you're going to have to again work together. And I think on day one you start building that consensus for team building, your own chemistry, your own administration, but also with the legislature. Bring them
right, because it has to work.
Again, identifying you have an issue, how we're going to solve it together, and I think that that's as important as any. And you set the tone as a leader. You set the tone. And you act appropriately, and you treat others the way you want to be treated. And I think you'll have the benefits from that perspective.
Great.
My first, when I got into politics, again, there was a guy named Dick Mazza, Senator Dick Mazza. He's from Grand Isle County, still there today, very powerful in the Senate, and had served in the House before, Senate, powerful member. And he took me under his wing, a Democrat, I'm a Republican, took me under his wing. We've become great friends. We talk daily. He's the one that convinced me I should run for lieutenant governor, and now he's supporting me again as governor. And I think that that's refreshing as well.
Yeah,
when you
I
have
agree.
People of both parties working towards a common goal. And he's had a fundraiser for me. He'll do anything in order to help me get elected. And I remember I was in a primary in my first election for lieutenant governor, and I remember was a Republican operative called me up and said, "Hey, I understand you have Dick Mazza in your camp. That's great news." But he said, you remember you're running in a Republican primary. You may want to distance yourself just a bit from him. You can use him in the general, but you may want to distance yourself from him in the primary because people might not
Republicans,
like the fact that you actually work with somebody from the other party. That may not work for you. And so I thought about it for about 15 or 20 seconds, and I thought, if I have to distance myself from somebody I hold in such high regard, that has salt of the earth, has integrity, follows through on their actions, and somebody that I really respect, it's not worth it.
Yeah, it's not.
You know, that's the problem with this world, that we don't accept that we have different ideas, perspectives, but we can always find something in common with one another. And I think
Yes,
that's
especially in Vermont, because you pretty much know everybody.
yeah, especially when you grow up here and you do business here, it is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I ran into some people in Brattleboro, friend of a friend of a friend, kind of thing.
Good. Well, we've pretty much used up all our time, and I really want to thank you because this has been a real heart-to-heart. I really enjoy the conversation. Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to talk about, or any point you would like to bring up that we haven't touched on?
Well, I think it's about involvement. I think if there's anything that I can get across to your constituency, your listenership, is to get involved. Last election that I was involved in, there was a 43% turnout. That's not good enough.
Not good enough.
That's not good enough.
Yeah.
And, we talk a lot about our dissatisfaction with DC. We talk a lot about dissatisfaction with, regardless of where you are. I don't think everyone's happy with the candidates that we have on the national level, on either side.
On either side, you're right.
So I think that there's a lot of unrest. The only way you change that is to get involved yourself in some way. And if you can't do anything on the national level, get involved on the local level. We all need to give back in some way. We all need to give our public service, whether it's as a first responder or in politics, regardless of what it is, or on the local level. Just get involved. Do your part. And we'll make it a better world together. But again, just remember, treat others the way you want to be.
Okay, thank you, Phil. That was great. And along those lines, early voting's open. So if people want to go to their town clerk and get a ballot, you can do that now and you can mail it in.
You can go right in your town clerk's office, vote right then, or you can request the ballot if you write or call in, and or you wait till August 9th. But again, this primary is going to be, I think, a low turnout, which is unfortunate.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's.
I'm hoping you're wrong.
Well, I'm hoping I'm wrong too. But every indicator is that people aren't taking it because it's earlier than normal.
Well, it is early. That's true. But
you know, the word out is important.
It's really important because. Again, well, like we talked about in the very beginning, this is the biggest change in Vermont government in a long, long time. So great. Good luck.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.